Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another splendid show for you today. I am joined by Niall Stanich. Niall, it's been a while.
It has been a while. I'm glad we are reunited, Robby, for one day's entertainment. Should be good.
So am I. What a treat.
How have you been?
I have been quite well, actually. How have you been?
I have been likewise very well, but I want to hear more about what is on your radar, so take it away.
Yes, lots of subjects to get to today that you and I enjoy discussing, I think. Iran being a very big one. Now, one of the criticisms of alternative media I have heard over the years is that podcasters, social media personalities, and influencers who describe themselves as independent-minded often fail to ask tough questions of their guests or push back when greater scrutiny is warranted. Joe Rogan is frequently cited as an example of this. He platforms provocative guests like Daryl Cooper and Ian Carroll. And because the format is friendly and informal, he fails to press them when they make dubious or outrageous claims. That was the thrust of the criticism made by British journalist Douglas Murray, who used his own appearance on Rogan as an opportunity to attack the host's failure to properly interrogate people that Murray considers to be, well, conspiracy theorists. Now, by contrast, mainstream media is characterized by hostile interviews. For example, see every single instance of CNN, CBS, or ABC interviewing a Republican political figure, though, to be fair, interviews with Democrats are often contentious as well. Politicians don't really want to be asked tough questions, but journalism is supposed to be adversarial, and the public is best served by interview formats that provoke discomfort. Now, if the traditional mainstream format is entirely replaced by podcasts where people get to say whatever they want and face no pushback whatsoever, it should be obvious that, one, this would be worse for the country, and two, politicians would absolutely prefer it. But here's the thing. The current debate over whether the U.S. military should become more involved in Israel's war against Iran is a powerful counterexample and showcases the unique ability of the podcast universe to, in some important cases, cut through the mainstream media's reflexive deference to hawkish national security experts and get to the root of fundamental questions. Do the American people really want another regime change war in the Middle East? Now, this dynamic was well illustrated by Tucker Carlson's recent interview with Senator Ted Cruz on X. The pair of conservative giants engaged in a 2-hour exchange on the subject of Iran. It was feisty and intermittently unpleasant, for them at least. It was madly entertaining for viewers, and gave Carlson ample opportunity to expose the hollowness of Cruz's position, which seemed to be that regime change in Iran would somehow work out better than regime change in Iraq, or Libya, or Syria. We played some of that interview yesterday, and subsequently I watched the whole thing, and it's really, really good content. I can't recommend it more. Here's another exchange.
Asking you answer it. Give me another reason. If you're not an anti-Semite, give me another reason why the obsession is Israel.
I am in no sense obsessed with Israel. We are on the brink of war with Iran, and so these are valid questions.
But you're not asking about Iran or the Ayatollah.
If I can finish, you asked me why I'm obsessed with Israel.
Yep.
3 minutes after telling me that when you first ran for Congress, you elucidated one of your main goals, which is to defend Israel.
Yes.
And I'm the one who's obsessed with Israel.
Yeah, that brief exchange really doesn't do it justice. What happened was that Cruz accused Carlson and other critics of the war effort of being obsessed with Israel, and even insinuating this was due to some vague anti-Semitic undercurrent. This accusation was remarkable because just moments earlier, as Carlson pointed out there, Cruz had admitted his own reason for running for office was to be the most pro-Israel U.S. senator in history. And then moments later, he confessed his unwavering support for Israel was due to a biblical passage that emphasizes those who side with Israel will be blessed. In response, Carlson sardonically mused on whether the Bible's authors had a specific Israeli government in mind. Look, it's not anti-Jewish or anti-Israel for the U.S. to think very carefully about whether supporting and aiding military strikes against Iran is in the best interest of Americans. Israel uses American weapons to launch its attacks, and it relies on American technology to protect its own citizens from Iranian counterattack. Israel does have the right to defend itself against attacks from hostile foreign powers and terrorists. It does not have the right to single-mindedly drag the U.S. into yet another boondoggle in the Middle East, particularly without congressional authorization. Now, Carlson, a Fox News host turned independent media giant, is actually hardly alone among podcasters in evincing skepticism about doing Israel's bidding in the Middle East. Joe Rogan is perturbed. Theo Vaughn has expressed horror over Israel's campaign in Gaza. Dave Smith says he regrets voting for Trump. He even thinks Trump should be impeached for breaking his promise not to start new wars. Those are just the plausibly right-adjacent podcasters. Left-leaning ones like Cenk Uygur, Mehdi Hassan, Glenn Greenwald, they're, of course, speaking up as well. Now, consider the mainstream media. Admittedly, I have not watched every single second of commentary on CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, or Fox this past week, nor have I read every column in the New York Times and the Washington Post. So if the following impression is false, I stand ready to apologize. But it certainly does not appear to me to be the case that legacy media commentary is intensely critical of what's about to take place in the Middle East. This is not particularly surprising. In the run-up to the Iraq War, mainstream media institutions were supportive on balance and frequently provided important justifications for the Bush administration. The New York Times was a particularly egregious offender. So here's my bottom line. Disdain independent media all you want. But with the U.S. government once again gearing up to do something really reckless that I believe a silent majority of Americans oppose, well, I'm glad at least this time around there is a healthy ecosystem of independent thinkers on the right and left who stand ready to argue against the mainstream bipartisan foreign policy consensus.
Good radar, Robby, as you would perhaps expect. I agree with quite a lot of that. First of all, I would share your compliments toward Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, someone who I have been critical of in lots of ways for all the reasons you would expect in terms of his more orthodox right-wing positions. But I thought that his interrogation of Ted Cruz was really strong and really exposed some of the contradictions in Cruz's position. We don't have time to go through every single thing, but there was a very telling exchange, I thought, where Carlson was pressing Cruz about, well, is Iran really strong and therefore to be feared and we need to take action now, or really weak and that's why we can take action now? And Cruz seemed to be arguing the two things simultaneously. Yes. And that sort of interrogation, I think, is very useful. In terms of independent media, there is, I think, a broader spectrum of views available. I mean, it seems to me that on this question in particular, whether you're watching CNN or you're watching Fox, there's a fairly narrow band of opinion that can be acceptably expressed, and that band of opinion does seem to be broader in some independent channels for sure.
Yes, and it's very sort of narrow is the right word. It's a lot of, I see a lot of commentary. Maybe I've just been watching the news reports that it's about, well, here are the technical capabilities of Israel. Here are the technical capabilities of the U.S. Here's what we expect from Iran. Here's where we think the weapons are. And less big picture, but okay, what happens if we do this? And I've seen so little discussion in more mainstream places of, well, who, let's say we kill Khamenei, who becomes the next leader of Iran? Is it just someone else from the Islamic extremist faction? Probably. Someone else from the military. The idea, and it comes through in that interview, Ted Cruz says, well, the ideal thing would be the people rise up and install a democratic leadership. Sure. I mean, yes, if I could manufacture that out of the ethos, that is what I would want to happen, but what gives you confidence that is going to take place? And Ted Cruz really had no answer for that, and nor does anyone else that we hear from. So some perspective on that would be so helpful with the Iraq example, you know, in our heads from our own recent lifetimes.
Yeah, and the willingness to discuss the fundamentals of this conflict, which the US seems to be on the brink of joining. Israel has nuclear weapons. Do we now accept that countries like India or Pakistan can bomb the other because of a putative threat? One thing before we go, Robby, you mentioned about right-leaning podcasters. We do, I believe, have a clip of Theo Vaughn, who's been really interesting on this topic generally, not presenting himself as an expert, but talking about how he sees this. Do we have that clip, guys?
Trying to get us into a war with Iran or not, America, if Israel is trying to. I don't trust the Israel leader at all. I don't believe anything that guy says. And I don't think that our soldiers should have to go and defend stuff that they start.
Yeah, it's a very good clip. And, you know, it's important to remember, so we all credit now Trump's strategy of appearing on that podcast with Joe Rogan and others as part of his broader appeal to Gen Z, to young men, and being successful, winning that demographic for Republicans over Democrats. This is a demographic that does not want to get sent to fight in a foreign war and is going to be totally against this. And Trump should keep in mind that if he goes to war with Iran, he's going against new voters he took in specifically because they like the more non-interventionist standpoint of
exactly.
Iran.
And Vaughn there presenting himself as not an expert but the voice of that kind of constituency, I think, is very important. Up next, a dire warning from former President Obama. The future of American democracy is at risk. Stay with us.